And now, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for author and environmentalist Paul Hawken. Paul, come on up here.
Okay.
So, Elvis was going to say, I knew Hawken before Hawken became Hawken. No, he was a big shot before I met him, but it was in some kind of tool business. Now he's dealing with the big stuff, not just how to fiddle around your garden. It's how to handle the big garden, which is the planet Earth. And he's written a number of books that have caught on, that are laying out the case. And that's what we need. We first of all have to know what's the problem and what are the solutions and how do we get there. And we need the optimism. Paul is more of an optimist than I am. Of course, I'm older than he is, and I've seen more shit because of the nature of my work. But I'm very encouraged by his optimism. And I like to say, pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. With that, Paul Hawken.
Thank you very much. I wish I had had a Jesuit education that this gentleman had, because that has made him just an extraordinary leader and governor and politician. And in 1977, he created with Sim Vanderven and Peter Calthorpe the Bateson Building in Sacramento. It was the design then, it was the first commercial building in the world that was designed to reduce emissions by 75%. And it was used passive cooling and so forth. So this is what this guy was doing in 1977. So he's been on the case for a long time. I just want to acknowledge that. I'm going to give a 45-minute speech in 20 minutes. So hang on. The speech is about drawdown. Drawdown means, in this context, it means that first time on a year-to-year basis where greenhouse gases go down, peak and go down. And the reason I use that term for my work in the book, Drawdown, is because I feel like we've never named the goal. The goal is not stabilization. The goal is not reducing the amount of carbon. The goal is not mitigation. Those are really wimpy goals. The only goal that makes sense is to bring it back home, bring the carbon back home and stop putting it up there in the first place. Otherwise, we have climatic, catastrophic life ahead of us, as the governor said. So drawdown, here's the good news right here. It's the bad news. This is a very succinct explanation of what's going on. This is CO2 levels for the past several 100,000 years. And that dotted line is 300 ppm. It never exceeded that until 1950. And then it went up over that. And it is said that it's 412 ppm right now. There's 412 ppm as opposed to 280 in the pre-industrial level age. And so, but this is the actual ppm level today because it includes the other greenhouse gases, methane, CO2, CFCs, nitrous oxide. So we're at 494, the highest it's been in 20 million years. So we're on Terra Nova. In other words, we don't know. This is a mysterious planet we're living on now that nobody has really inhabited it before because it's never been this way. Luckily, there's a lag time, but it's for real. That is how long it takes the rise in greenhouse gases to have effect. And how does it work? Global warming is very simple. We get warmer. Second, what happens? The circulation models change. There's circulation of air west to east on both below and above the equator, and they change. And it's sort of like the difference between, say, having a jump rope, empty ropes amiss, and you're there doing a jump rope, and then taking a rope like this and whipsawing it. And that's what's happening now, and that's why you see the Midwest cyclone, which you saw in Mozambique the last few days, the fires in California, et cetera. And that is not going to be linear. That is to say, the increase in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the weather does not follow it in a linear pattern. It's a very different system, a climatic system. So this is basically 26 seconds of talking about global warming is here. flood, drought, fire, heat, migration, war. It's here. Suffering. So it's not as though we have a future, we have to really address it. We have to address it now in every way the governor mentioned. Now, Drawdown started in 2015. I thought about it in 2001. And basically what I looked at is what the governor referred to is that the communication about climate doesn't take. That is, most people in the world are completely disengaged about this subject, whether they're prime ministers or whether they're a peasant or anything in between. Why is that? Why is the gravest crisis civilization has ever faced, why is it sort of like this for most people? 99% of the people in the world are clueless and don't care about it. How do we do that? And one of the ways we did it is, with all due respect, is talking about 2C and 1.5C and future existential threat. And I'm telling you, go to San Francisco, any place where you live, go to the person on the street and say, what do you think about 2C in 2050? And see how long it takes to find somebody who says, I'm concerned about it. No one's concerned about a future existential threat because our brains aren't wired that way. That's not what human beings do. They are concerned about current existential threat. And the reason we know that is that you wouldn't be here if your ancestors weren't good at it. So you can be thankful that they were really good at meeting current existential threat. Food, habitat, war, peace, whatever it was, they did it really, really well for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and those are you're the descendant of those people. But nobody went around then or now to say, oh, well, in 2050, this is going to happen. The science is impeccable, but the communication is disastrous. So we have to respect the science. So what we did at Project Drawdown is we accumulated scientists from around the world, really scholars from 60 universities, 21 countries, 6 continents, and we wanted to map, measure, and model the 100 most impactful solutions to reversing global warming. And why do we want to do that? Because it has never been done before. This has been in the public sphere for 45 years. And no one ever measured the top solutions. Not top 20, top 30, 50, you name it. Go find it. It's not there. It's so anthropologically, it's so fascinating that we never did it. And we didn't have any money, so we did it the old-fashioned way, which is like Tom Sawyer. We got volunteers from all over the world. Half PhDs, almost half women, almost every major religion, some other ones as well. And we came together and we did exactly that. And we published it in a book called Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. And what you're going to see right now quickly is some of the solutions, because what you normally hear, and it's right in terms of emissions, is clean energy, wind, solar, EVs, transport, that we have to reduce our carbon emissions from the combustion of fossil fuels. No question about that. It comprises 64 to 75% of the emissions on a daily basis. So they're crucial solutions. But the thing is, the way you start something isn't necessarily the way you go out. The solutions you would think would be solar, wind, EVs, et cetera. And we did this modeling in a way that prohibited bias and peer-reviewed science only. You'll see the economic impact as well. That's from the IEA, that's from the IPCC, the World Bank, Bloomberg Energy. And then we had outside expert scientific reviewers reviewing the model and the data. So what you're seeing here is not what our NGO did and what we know. What you're seeing now is what we are doing, because we only modeled solutions that are well in hand, that are scaling. We know how to do it. It's W.W. Granger. It isn't rocket science. It isn't technology in the future. It's what we are doing right now. So what Drawdown is, and what you'll see, is us holding a mirror up to the world and saying, this is what you know, and this is what you're doing. And if it scales, continues in a rigorous way, we can reverse global warming before or by 2050. And it's not the news we get. What the news we get is despair and hopelessness and, threat and fear and doom and gloom. And when we did the book, we used none of that, because what we feel is that we respect the science. Let's talk about the solutions. So we want to know where we stood. So these are just solutions. I'm just going to go through them quickly. We don't have a lot of time. Indigenous people's land management. Wind is the number 2 solution. Look at the savings by 2050, $7.4 trillion. It has doubled since then because of the learning rate on wind turbines. It's over $15 trillion now that we would save if we went to wind energy as opposed to coal or gas. Right now in Colorado, you can take an operating coal-fired power plant, tear it down, demolish it, replace it with wind turbines, and that company will save money. We've reached an amazing point in terms of the learning rate and the cost of renewable energy. This is afforestation, putting trees where they haven't been before. This is Japan all over. This is high-speed rail. This is modified rice. In other words, there's 2 ways to change your rice cultivation to reduce methane emissions. This is wind turbines offshore. We had to model them differently. The economics are very, very different. Here's another area where the price is crashing. This is women's smallholders. Why is this here? Again, we didn't say, well, we want to have it to look this way. We just mapped, measured, and modeled, and this is what came out. And the fact is that women, smallholders produce 75 to 80% of the world's food. It isn't big ag, I gotta tell you. That's what they have you believe. But big ag doesn't feed the world. It produces big pharma, which is heart attack, disease, stroke, sugar, et cetera, and CAFOs, et cetera. Smallholders feed the world, and 40% of them are women. And if they get the same tools, techniques, and support that men get, they outperform men by a mile. They produce much more food. And if we give that support to women, then it's 200 million acres of forest that will be intact because they're not going to be taken down to feed the world. So walkable cities. This is Buenos Aires, the hometown of my wife. This is rooftop solar. Again, we're trying to change the way we look at these solutions, not like a garage in Atlanta, with a 10 kilowatt array of solar panels, with a 3-car garage, but, solar. This is an Oda woman in Lake Titicaca, and she's smiling not because of the impact on the atmosphere, but because she no longer uses kerosene in her straw hut on her straw island so her girls can study at night. Really, we have to understand that these technologies, these things really impact us in a very different way than we just think about. This is bike infrastructure. You change infrastructure, people go on bikes. You don't change it, bikes are dangerous. Green roofs, regenerative agriculture. I could go on for hours on this one. Other people will talk about it, so I'll just pass. Tree intercropping, biochar, basically terra preta is called, discovered in the Amazon, a combination of charcoal or pyrolyzed char mixed with ceramics. And in some way, they kept the fertility in these very thin Amazonian soils for 500 years. And now it's being used. It's an amazing additive to soil. Tropical tree, staple crops. And I guess I said, I'm not going to be able to spend much time on each of these. Net zero buildings, electric bikes. This is Berlin. Managed grazing or rotational grazing or amp grazing. There's lots of words for it, but you cannot restore grasslands without animals. You have to choose which animal, but all the grasslands, whether it's the Buffalo Commons or the Serengeti, co-evolved with animals. You take the animals off, the land goes south. And it already goes south with big ag. You take the animals off, it gets even worse, okay? So This is the bringing back those animals. This is forest protection. This is the Great Bear Forest in British Columbia. There is 1 billion hectares of land that's been abandoned in the world. It's been destroyed, farmed out, eroded by big ag and small ag too, okay? And talk about, you can put more water in an empty cup than a half full cup. So this is an incredible opportunity to use regenerative agricultural methods to bring down carbon. This is soot, this is black carbon, the governor mentioned, clean cook stoves. This is a silver pasture. You put cows and trees together. Amazing rate of sequestration of carbon being pulled back and stored inside the soil instead of upside in the atmosphere. Reduce food waste, the number 3 solution. When you want to ask yourself, what can I do? Well, you can start today on this one. Do not waste food. If you're not going to eat it, don't take it. It is not cool to push your plate away. I'm sorry, it's not cool at all. 40%, and some say 45% of all the food produced in the United States is thrown away. It's thrown away in our refrigerators, in our restaurants, in our supermarkets, and we do it personally every single day. And you're going to eat today, so you can watch each other and seriously. And what's so great about this solution is that if you do it at every meal, it's an awareness you have every day. You're like, okay, I'm aware of my relationship to the earth, to the environment, I mean, really, when you think about food, there's a farmer growing seeds, right? He's plowing this, he's doing that, whatever he's growing. Okay, and he's got tractors, diesel tractors, and then he's combining, harvesting the seeds. He's taking them to, someplace they're cleaned. Those seeds are bagged. Those are sold to go back to some farmer somewhere. He or she then is doing the same thing, putting in fertilizer. They're using diesel tractors. They're, cultivating. So they're putting glyphosate on their soil and going to get sued soon for doing that. But nevertheless, putting glyphosate in the soil, and then they're harvesting it, and then trucks come, and they put it in the trucks, and they take it to mills, and then they're cleaned, and then that stuff is sent to a processor. That processor grinds it, does something with it, makes a food-like substance, sends it to basically a food company, makes it, puts it in a plastic bag, and then they truck it to a distributor. That distributor goes to the supermarket. You go there, you drive there, you buy it, you go home, and you throw it away. That's what's happening. So when you throw away food, you're throwing away an amazing supply chain of effort, and it's you think of immigration. Why are people immigrating? So many work for us on our behalf to feed us with miserable wages and conditions and so forth. In a sense, you're dishonoring those people as well, and their work, and their lives, and what they stand for. So I'll stop on that one. This is household recycling. Whole story behind that picture. Tropical forest protection, number 5. Forests are huge carbon sinks. We have to protect them. Coastal wetlands, plant-rich diet. You only need 55 grams of protein a day. Do the math and move more of your protein to plants, to seeds, to nuts, to beans, or whatever. And reduce your intake of meat. It's not good for you. It's not good for the planet, except where the animals are incorporated into managed grazing. This is the number 6 solution. It's called educating girls. And when you support girls to not be pulled out of school for early marriage or go to work, for their brothers to go to school, when you support their education so they get an equivalent of a high school education, those girls make very different choices because they become a woman much more, if not entirely, on their own terms, and their reproductive choices are 2+ children on the average, less than replacement rate. And if she is pulled out of school and forced to marry and forced to go to work and not complete her education, she has an average of 5+ children. So the number here, 59.60, is half of the family planning impact by the UN in 2050 between the high and median population of 119.2 gigatons, billion tons of carbon. And so This is a pathway to family planning, and family planning is the other half of this, 59.6 billion tons. We just split it in the middle. How can you separate? But again, who knew? Solar, wind, and Elon Musk? Yeah, well, wait a minute. What about women? What about girls? What about education? And it's very interesting because demographers have just came out, I'm running out of time, just with the report that said, the UN has got the population stuff wrong because women are not just girls like at that point when they're 12 or 13 and pre-adolescent. It's not just then. Women all over the world are going back to school, are educating themselves, and they're seeing the numbers, and the UN doesn't take this into consideration. And they're saying now the population in 2100 is only going to be 8.18 billion, as opposed to 11 to 12 billion. And so it's a very interesting area. Future solutions, these are coming attractions. This company is a fusion company. You may think it will never happen. They've actually done hot enough, long enough, just 2 months ago. They're building the first reactor. They, in the process, created capacitors, capacitor technology or battery technology that will improve the efficiency of every EV, solar inverter, storage system in the world by 25%. Tri-Alpha Energy, they're in Irvine, they're here in California. They're a great, great company. Building with wood, there's 80 and 90-story buildings being permitted now. They're to go up, built entirely of wood, no steel, no concrete. Concrete and steel together are 11% of global emissions of CO2. Wood sequesters it. You grow it, afforestation, sequesters carbon, you cut it, you laminate it, CLTs, and you make buildings that can go up 90 stories, 100 stories. And that's coming too. This is cities like Forest. This is Stefano Boeri and the work that's going on mostly in China. And basically, you look at a plot of land and you put a building there where the ecosystem services from that building are 5, 6, 7 times greater than what was happening on the land before you built the building in terms of water, in terms of oxygen production, sequestration, pollinators, etc. This is happening. They're measuring it. They're using tools. They're doing it, and doing it in China and Singapore. And this last one was a discovery by accident, which is of a algae that when fed to cows reduces enteric emissions by 70%. And it reduces methane emissions by 70%. It's called Asparagopsis taxiformis. Only in a 1 to 2% amount it does that. These are the top 20 solutions. 8 are food-based. Again, who knew? We didn't, certainly at Drawdown, by the way. I'm not going to say that. I'm not saying that like we did, you didn't know. We certainly didn't know. We were surprised. And you can see it in a tree map. Why is transport so low on the right? Exactly because of what the governor said. In other words, it's the International Energy Agency. And their projections in 2050 is there's 2 billion cars instead of 1 billion. So everything we did was based on external business as usual scenarios. And so that's why it's there. This is what it looks like in a pie chart. There is no, it's not like there's, people say, what's the most important solutions? They're all important. What's the most important part of your body? It's all important. You're a system, we're a system. The system caused it, it's a system that cures it. So it's not like, oh, let's all rush to the big ones. Well, let's do those, all of them. But like I say, it isn't, we have to stop thinking like there's a lever somewhere that we can push, There's the book. The subtitle is so cheeky and brash. And the reason it's there is because no one has ever proposed a plan to reverse global warming. So I could have said the most literate, the most fascinatingly written plan, it would have been true, and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be true. There should have been a lot more plans before now. This is the last slide. The book is taught from 4th grade to MIT graduate school. It's in 12 languages. It's used by heads of state, not ours, but others. And we're grateful that we're the 5th largest country in the world, California, and we have the greatest leader of the other countries that are up above us. But these are children up in the air in Boulder. It's a children's theater company enacting the solutions in Drawdown. And this is peas and carrots talking to each other about a plant-rich diet. And I show this because I think if humans move towards possibility, they really don't gravitate around problems. Problems are always a solution in disguise by definition. And this is the most gnarly, super wicked problem humanity has ever comprehended. So therefore, it is laden with a plethora of brilliant solutions. So global warming is horrific in terms of its potential impacts, but it's also a gift because it's feedback from the system. Anytime you ignore feedback, you're in trouble. That system is in trouble. And that feedback leads us, if we listen and accept it, understand it, to a transformed and much better world than the one we live in today. Thanks so much.